Hey there, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments.
They say engagement parties are meant to be joyful, filled with laughter, awkward toasts, and maybe an overcooked roast chicken. Mine was different. Mine cracked open the kind of truth that makes your stomach churn long after dessert is served. We were sitting at a long oak table at my parents' house in Connecticut, the kind they only pull out for holidays or photo ops. White linen, mismatched wine glasses, those dusty plates with gold rims that had probably belonged to someone dead and unhappy. My fiancé Mark had his arm around the back of my chair, rubbing slow, lazy circles on my shoulder like I was his pet project. My mom, Karen, had just clinked her spoon against her glass, narrowing her eyes in a way that warned us all to shut up. Dad looked like he wanted to shrink into his seat. That wasn't new. Then she said it. Clear as a bell, not even pretending it slipped out. "Wish your sister could be here," she sighed, lifting her wine like it was a goddamn award. "She's always been more desirable." And just like that, the room went silent. I stared at her, frozen in the kind of disbelief that feels physical, like getting slapped, but slower. No one else reacted. No one flinched. It was like they were used to it. Like this was just Karen being Karen. My brother-in-law awkwardly cleared his throat. My aunt poured more wine. Dad stared at his plate like it held answers. I opened my mouth to respond, but Mark beat me to it. He smirked, slow and deliberate, and slid his phone across the table toward me. "She texted me last night," he said casually, like he was talking about the weather. "Want to see what she said?" The air sucked out of the room like someone had cracked open a vacuum. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor gave out under me. I blinked at him, thinking maybe I'd heard wrong. Maybe this was some sick inside joke. One of those moments where your fiancé tries to be edgy and ends up just being cruel. But Mark wasn't joking. His mouth curled up at the corner like this was a punchline I hadn't earned yet. I looked at the phone. The screen was lit. He'd opened his messages. And right there, right fucking there, was a text from a number labeled simply as L. I picked it up with hands that barely felt real. The message wasn't long. It wasn't even words. It was a photo. And in that photo, standing in what looked like a hotel bathroom mirror, was Lily, my sister, smiling like she'd never left, wearing my dress, not just any dress, the cream silk one I bought with Mark, the one he said made me look like someone out of his league, the one I was planning to wear to our honeymoon dinner. I pushed the phone back across the table like it was poison. My mouth tasted like copper. I looked at Mark, trying to find some sign of guilt, some flicker of shame. There was none. "What the hell is this?" I asked, voice low, controlled, too controlled. He shrugged. "She reached out, said she missed me. I figured you'd want to know." "You figured I'd want to know? Here?" I hissed. "At our engagement dinner? In front of my entire family?" "She's still your sister," my mom cut in, calm as ever. "Whatever's going on between the two of you shouldn't ruin a family event." I laughed. It came out sharp and cracked. Nothing like humor. "She's been missing for 5 years, Mom. Remember that? The police report, the candlelight vigil, your fake tears." Karen rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "She needed time. You of all people should understand that." "Understand what exactly? That my sister ghosted everyone? That she faked her vanishing act? Left behind nothing but her perfume and a half-written note on a sticky pad? That my mother covered for her?" Mark leaned in, voice low now. "She's not missing, Rachel. She's just gone. Gone, like that made it better." "Why the hell is she wearing my dress?" I asked. "I gave it to her, Hatay," he said like he was telling me what he had for lunch. I felt the ground start to tilt. "You gave it to her?" "It was just a joke," he said quickly. "She wanted to mess with you. You know how she is." I stood up. My legs barely worked. "This isn't a joke. This is sick." And then, because the universe really knows how to pile it on, my dad, who hadn't said a word all night, finally looked up. His voice was soft. I always knew she'd come back eventually. That's when I realized I was the only one in the room who hadn't known. Not really. Mark, my mother, even my goddamn father. They all knew Lily was out there, sending selfies, playing dress-up with my life. I was the one sitting here like a fool, grinning through toasts, thinking I was building something real. I left the table without another word. My heels clicked against the tile like a countdown. I didn't cry, not yet. But I knew two things with perfect clarity. Lily wasn't gone, and Mark wasn't mine. And whatever game they were playing, they had no idea what kind of player I was about to become. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not to the apartment Mark and I shared. Not to the bed where he'd probably imagined my sister more times than I cared to count. Instead, I drove aimlessly for almost an hour before pulling into a motel off Route 8. The kind with flickering neon and plastic plants in the lobby. The room smelled like cigarettes and lemon cleaner, but it was quiet, and more importantly, it didn't have him in it. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my engagement dinner dress, and stared at the photo of Lily on Mark's phone until my eyes blurred. She looked smug. That was the only word for it. Not happy, not relaxed, smug, like she'd won something, like she knew I was watching. And the worst part? She was standing in front of a mirror I recognized, not from memory, but from a photo Mark had posted weeks ago, bragging about the hotel he stayed at for some work trip in Boston. Same mirror, same ugly wallpaper, same cheap gold faucet. So she hadn't just texted him out of the blue. They'd been together recently. The realization settled over me like cold oil, slow, thick, suffocating. The next morning, after 2 hours of restless sleep and 3 cups of coffee that tasted like burnt dirt, I went back to our apartment while Mark was at work. I didn't touch anything. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just looked. I opened drawers, searched behind books, checked under the bed, behind picture frames. I was looking for what exactly? Proof? Closure? Something that made me feel like I wasn't losing my mind? And then, in the bottom drawer of his desk, under a pile of receipts and old birthday cards, I found a small black phone, not his iPhone. This one was older, a little scuffed, with no passcode. I turned it on, my hands cold despite the June heat. There were only a few messages on it, all from a number labeled L. The earliest was from 6 months ago, just a single sentence. "You still think about me?" No greeting, no explanation, just that. My stomach turned as I kept reading. The messages were sparse but intimate. Late-night check-ins, shared memories, things that felt too familiar to be friendly. One of them simply said, "She still wears her hair the same way. That's funny." I didn't know whether to scream or throw up. When Mark came home that evening, I was sitting on the couch with the burner phone in my hand. I didn't greet him. I didn't pretend. He froze the second he saw it. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw something crack behind his eyes. "You've been snooping," he said carefully, like I was the problem. "You've been cheating," I answered, keeping my voice low and level. The way you do when you're trying not to cry in front of the person who made you cry in the first place. Mark sat down slowly, like I was a stray dog that might bite. "It's not what you think. You've been texting my sister. You've been with my sister. In Boston 2 weeks ago, that's exactly what I think it is." He looked down, rubbed his temples like he was the one being put through hell. "I didn't look for her, Rachel. She found me." "Did she twist your arm to get in your hotel room too?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back and sighed, like this was exhausting for him. "She's not what you think either." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think I don't know who Lily is? I grew up with her. I watched her charm the whole damn world while I was the spare. She lies, Mark. She lies and takes and plays people like it's a goddamn hobby." "You're angry," he said, stating the obvious like it was useful. "No," I replied, standing up. "I'm not angry. I'm done." I left him sitting there, dumbstruck, phone still in his hand. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't slam the door. I didn't want drama. I wanted answers, and I knew just where to look. 2 hours later, I was parked in front of a run-down townhouse on the edge of New Haven. It belonged to Danny, Lily's closest friend back in the day. The one Lily used to whisper secrets to after family dinners. The one she got drunk with the night before she vanished. If anyone knew what had really happened to my sister, it would be Danny. She answered the door in sweats, holding a baby on her hip, looking surprised but not shocked. We hadn't spoken in years, but she didn't hesitate. She let me in. We sat in her cluttered living room, the smell of baby formula and stale coffee hanging between us. When I asked about Lily, her face changed. She didn't pretend. She didn't play dumb. "She's not dead," Danny said flatly. "She just didn't want to be found." I nodded slowly, while Danny hesitated, then glanced at her kid, who was chewing on a plastic giraffe. "Because she got involved with someone married, someone important. It got messy. She ran. It wasn't about escaping danger. It was about escaping consequences." I leaned forward. "Who was he?" She looked at me, really looked, and I could see something shift in her eyes. "I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, I'd say he looked a lot like the guy you're marrying." That hit like a punch. I couldn't breathe for a second. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were falling into place too fast to ignore. The overlapping timelines, the secret meetings, the photo, the texts. Mark had known Lily before I ever came into the picture. They had history. And I had been the convenient detour. My engagement wasn't the start of something new. It was the messy continuation of a story that never really ended. And now, I wasn't just part of it. I was in the middle of it. And I had no intention of staying the fool. The air outside Danny's townhouse felt heavier than it had going in. Like the knowledge I now carried had a physical weight, something I had to drag with me step by step, back to a life that was never really mine to begin with. I sat in my car, not yet turning the key, staring out at the cracked sidewalk and overgrown weeds that wrapped around her fence like they had nowhere else to go. Mark had known Lily. Not just known her. He'd been with her, before me, during me, maybe even the whole damn time. And all those moments I thought we were building something. A life, a future, a partnership. It was all tangled up in some old affair that had gone too far and never truly ended. I should have gone back to the motel, or even just driven until the road ran out, but something inside me burned hotter than it ever had before. I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. I wanted to look someone in the eye and make them squirm under the truth, just like I'd done the night before. And there was only one person left who had been suspiciously calm through all of this. Someone who had sat at that engagement table and made a cruel comment without blinking, like she knew exactly what she was stirring up. My mother. I don't know what I expected when I pulled into my parents' driveway. Maybe she'd be out gardening, pruning her roses like everything was normal, or maybe she'd be on the phone, spinning some story to one of her bridge club friends. Instead, she was in the kitchen, humming as she sliced peaches over the sink. The way her hands moved, slow, methodical, reminded me of the way she used to cut into my self-worth. One tiny comment at a time, each one too small to scream about, but sharp enough to bleed. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "You didn't call," she said, as if that were the crime of the century. I stood there just watching her, taking in the soft clink of the knife against the glass bowl, the scent of fresh fruit mixed with the faint chemical smell of whatever she'd just cleaned the counter with. "You knew," I said finally. "You knew Lily was alive." She stopped slicing, the knife hovering midair, and turned to face me. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes narrowed just a bit. "Yes," she said calmly. "I knew." Just like that, no apology, no gasp, no theatrics. Just 3 words that confirmed everything I had feared. "For how long?" I asked, my voice rougher than I wanted it to be. "A few months," she said, going back to her peaches. She called me from a blocked number, said she was safe, said she didn't want to come home. "And you didn't think I deserved to know?" She set the knife down and looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "What would you have done, Rachel? Run after her? Beg her to explain?" She left. She chose that. I chose not to drag you back into it. Don't pretend this was about protecting me, I snapped. You always protected her, always. Even when she was screwing up, even when she was lying. You let me carry the weight of being the good daughter so she could burn down everything around her without consequence. Her face stayed still, but I could see it. The flicker of defensiveness, the tightening of her jaw. She was fragile, she said. No, I said, stepping forward. She was manipulative, and you fell for it every time. She looked away toward the window, where the sun was starting to fall behind the trees. She's your sister. And Mark? I asked, almost daring her. Did you know about him too? This time she didn't answer right away. She picked up the bowl, moved it to the fridge, took her time pressing the lid down. Lily told me they had history, she said after a long pause. She said it was over. You believed her. She turned to face me, her eyes harder now. I wanted to believe her. You were happy, Rachel. For once you weren't trying so damn hard to impress everyone. I didn't want to take that from you. I felt something twist in my chest. So you let me get engaged to someone who had already been with my sister. You weren't supposed to find out, she said flatly. Not like this. It was such a cold, calculated thing to say that I actually stepped back, like the force of it pushed me. I thought about all the times she'd asked about Mark, the way she watched him at family dinners, that subtle, knowing look that I always chalked up to maternal suspicion. She hadn't been suspicious. She'd been complicit. I'm not your puppet, I said, suddenly feeling like a child again, like all the times I tried to earn her approval, like every honor roll certificate, every perfect Thanksgiving table setting. Every quiet compliance meant nothing compared to the way Lily could do no wrong. No, she said softly, you're not. You're the one who stays, the one who endures. It wasn't a compliment. It was a sentence. I left without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. Back at the motel, I poured myself the tiny bottle of bourbon from the minibar and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the burner phone again. I scrolled through the messages like they held a secret I'd missed. Something that would explain why Mark had chosen me after Lily, or maybe because of Lily. Then it happened. Another message came through, just 5 words. I miss your fiancé's hands. And then another. On my neck, L. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My hands shook. Not from fear, but from something darker, colder. This wasn't just a game between them anymore. This was war. And Lily had just made her move. The thing was, I'd always played fair, but not anymore. The moment I read that message, I knew I had to stop reacting and start thinking like them, like her. Lily never did anything without calculation. She didn't just disappear 5 years ago out of some childish desire for escape. She vanished because it gave her power. She gave up comfort for control, for attention, for the ability to haunt us like a ghost we could never bury. And now, with a few texts and a smirk in a mirror, she had turned my engagement, my family, and my sense of identity into her little stage play. I wasn't going to be the audience anymore. For 3 days, I didn't speak to Mark. I didn't answer his calls, didn't open his messages, didn't even let myself see his name pop up, without that sick twist of nausea and fury. I stayed at the motel, and every night I stared at that burner phone until my eyes burned. The texts didn't stop. Lily was taunting me, reminding me of things only sisters remember, twisting childhood memories into daggers, sending me photos of places we'd been as kids with captions like, "Remember this spot? He kissed me here first." She was cruel in a way that felt rehearsed, as if she'd been waiting years to unleash it. But the thing about cruelty is that it has patterns, and patterns can be used against you. I started planning, not out of revenge, at least not entirely, but out of necessity. I had been the passive player in their story, the woman left to pick up the pieces after everyone else decided to go rogue. That was over. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one they wouldn't forget. I started with something small, pretending nothing was wrong. I texted Mark one morning around 9, just 3 words. Let's talk tonight. No punctuation, no emotion, it was bait, and I knew he'd take it. Sure enough, he showed up at the motel with coffee and a sheepish smile, dressed in that fake casual way that men do when they know they're being watched. He tried to kiss my cheek. I let him. I didn't flinch. I didn't accuse. I played it calm. "I'm sorry," he said the second he sat down, like a magician opening a show with his best trick. "I should have told you. I should have been honest from the beginning." I nodded like I agreed. "Why weren't you?" He sighed and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He's doing that fake heavy thing where they try to look haunted. "Because I thought it was over, with her. I thought she was gone, Rachel. And then she came back and it messed with my head. You don't understand what she does to people." "Oh, I do," I said, taking a sip of my drink. "Better than anyone." He started crying then, or pretending to. I couldn't tell. I didn't care. He begged for another chance, promised he'd block her, promised he'd prove it to me. I told him I believed him, even reached across and held his hand, and the whole time I smiled on the inside. Because while he was feeding me lies, I had already set something else in motion. 2 days earlier, I had hired a private investigator, someone Danny had recommended, someone who didn't ask many questions and promised results quickly. I gave him Mark's license plate, the hotel dates from Boston, even the burner phone. I told him to find Lily, to find out where the money was going, because if Mark had been supporting her, if he had been funneling funds or booking rooms under fake names or covering her trail, there would be a trail, and I intended to follow every last inch of it. That night, I let Mark sleep next to me in the motel bed, even let him hold me while I lay there staring at the ceiling. I imagined him lying to Lily the same way, feeding her that same nonsense about love and confusion. And I imagined Lily eating it up, thinking she had won, thinking she had stolen something from me that I'd ever truly wanted in the first place. The next morning, I got the first email from the PI. Mark had been sending money regularly, transfers to a PayPal account under a fake name. The name traced back to a P.O. box in upstate New York, not a bank account, not a friend. A literal box in a rundown postal office in a town no one visits unless they have something to hide. That's where Lily had been picking up her money. That's where she'd been feeding off the chaos like a parasite with a platinum card. I didn't confront Mark. I didn't cry or scream or throw a wine glass at the wall. I made him breakfast. I wore the robe he liked. I smiled. I told him I wanted a second engagement dinner, something small with just close family and friends. I told him I wanted to move forward. I told him I forgave him. And he believed every word. The next week was a blur of fake joy and secret calls. I found a venue, a quiet little Italian place downtown, with a private room and good lighting. I sent out invitations. I booked a cake. I even picked out a new dress, not the one Lily had stolen, but something sleeker, bolder, something that screamed, "I'm not the girl you remember." Every detail was curated, every name on the guest list chosen with precision. And then I added one final name, the PI, not as a guest, of course, as my +1. Because if there was one thing I knew about Lily, it was that she couldn't resist a performance. She wouldn't stay silent for long. She'd want to watch the fallout, maybe even join it. And I was going to give her the perfect stage. She had played dead once, but now it was my turn. By the time the second engagement dinner arrived, the only emotion I felt was cold calculation. Not nerves, not doubt, just the steady rhythm of a plan, laid out so perfectly that even the messiness of human emotion couldn't derail it. I had thought through every word, every facial expression, every strategic pause in conversation. This wasn't a dinner. It was a reckoning wrapped in white tablecloths and candles, disguised as redemption, and carefully laced with the kind of truths people don't come back from. The venue was a charming little restaurant on the edge of town, the kind where people go to celebrate anniversaries or pretend their marriages aren't falling apart. The manager gave me the private room with the brick walls and the fireplace I requested. It looked intimate and expensive, exactly the kind of place where people let their guard down. Mark arrived first, wearing the blazer I once told him made him look trustworthy. and he kissed me like a man trying to rewrite history. He brought roses. I thanked him like a good fiancé should. Guests trickled in slowly. My mother, of course, arrived on time and acted like the last conversation we had had. Been about pot roast instead of betrayal. My father hovered near the drinks table like always, sipping scotch and saying nothing. A few family friends came, all oblivious, all ready to toast to a future they assumed was still intact. I greeted everyone warmly, kissed cheeks, poured wine, and smiled like a woman who had put the past behind her. But the entire time, I kept glancing toward the door, waiting. And then, right as the waiter dimmed the lights and someone began tapping a spoon against a glass, the door opened and he walked in. Not Lily, the PI. Dressed in a tailored black suit, blending in like a friend of the family, he nodded to me with the kind of subtlety that lets you know everything is exactly as it should be. He took his place at the far end of the table, pretending to check his phone, while I stood, smiling sweetly at our guests. I thanked them all for coming. I said a few words about second chances, about forgiveness, about building something real after a hard year. Mark squeezed my hand, beaming like a man who thinks he's gotten away with it. And then I turned to him and said, "Before we eat, I thought it might be nice to share a few messages, the ones that brought us here." He froze. The entire table turned toward me with varying degrees of confusion. My mother's lips pressed together in a warning I didn't care to acknowledge. I pulled the burner phone out of my purse and tapped the speaker icon. The PI had extracted every voice message Lily had sent over the last 2 weeks, and one in particular had stood out. It wasn't long, just her voice, smooth and smug and unmistakably her, saying, "He told me he loved me again last night. Can you believe that? In your bed with your name on his lips? God, you make it too easy." The room went still. Mark's face drained of color so fast it looked like he'd been slapped. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My mother made a strangled noise like she was trying to stand up but had forgotten how. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I simply turned to him and asked, "Was it worth it?" He blinked, still stunned. "Rachel, No," I cut him off. "Don't lie again. Not here, not now. You gave her my dress, my secrets, my life. But what you didn't know, what neither of you knew, is that I stopped being yours the second she sent that first message." People started murmuring. Someone dropped a fork. The PI stood and walked quietly to the head of the room, handing me a small envelope. I opened it slowly and pulled out the printed statements. Bank transfers, hotel bookings, P.O. box receipts, all with Mark's name or card or IP address. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, not even looking at him anymore. "Did you think I'd just keep smiling and cooking and planning your future while you replayed mine with someone who doesn't even want you, just wants to win?" Mark looked down at the table, eyes glassy. I was confused. "No," I said. "You were selfish." My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "Rachel, enough." I looked at her, and for once I didn't shrink. "You let this happen. You covered for her. You watched me fall apart, and did nothing because you were so used to Lily getting away with everything." "She's your sister," my mother said, almost pleading now. "No," I said coldly. "She was your daughter. I was just your placeholder." The room was silent. Everyone waited for the explosion that never came. Mark stood up, but he didn't say anything. He just looked at me, that same dumb, helpless look I had seen too many times before, and then he left, quietly, no tantrum, no begging, just a man who had been thoroughly and publicly exposed. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, he disappeared. No texts, no calls, no activity on any of his cards. His phone went straight to voicemail, and by the 3rd day, his mother filed a missing person report. The police questioned me, of course, and I told them the truth. He left my engagement dinner after being confronted with evidence of infidelity. I hadn't seen or heard from him since. They asked if I had any idea where he might have gone. I told them no, but that wasn't entirely true, because that same afternoon, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a necklace, silver, delicate, familiar, the one Lily had worn in that hotel bathroom photo, the one she always said made her feel invincible. Taped to the chain was a note, just 6 words. You always were better at pretending. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. I held it in my hand, staring at the reflection in the motel mirror, not my apartment mirror, not the place where he had once touched her and then kissed me. Just me in a room that wasn't mine, with silence thick enough to choke on. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I knew they hadn't. Lily may have played dead once, but I learned from the best. And now I wasn't pretending.